There are moments when the emptiness takes over everything. It's not like sadness that comes and goes. It's a permanent weight, dragging down every little part of who I used to be. I used to fight it, trying to hide it, pretending everything was okay. But there were days when even breathing felt painful. In those moments, when opening my eyes seemed like an impossible task, the question that consumed me was always the same. How do you keep going when you've run out of strength? It's hard to explain what it's like to wake up every day carrying a pain that no one sees, a pain that even you can't fully name. But I felt it, and it was relentless.
I'm Rachel Harper. Today, I'm sharing a story that highlights the deep struggles many face behind closed doors. This story is based on real events, but some names and details have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. If this story resonates with you, please consider sharing, liking, and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Now let's get into today's story.
My name is Mike. I'm 22 years old, and I work as an assistant at a local accounting office. These past few months, I've been trying to adjust to adult life, but honestly, it's been a battle. I grew up in a small town, the son of a nurse and a small business owner. My family has always valued physical and mental well-being, but no matter how much they cared, I could never bring myself to share what was going on inside of me. Depression started creeping in quietly when I was still in high school. I remember senior year, when the weight of expectations began to settle on my shoulders. Everyone around me was talking about the future: college, successful careers, how to become someone important. The pressure was overwhelming, and though I tried to stay optimistic, something inside me started to break. Stress began to take over. The first sign was exhaustion, not just the kind of physical tiredness you can sleep off, but a deep exhaustion that made me want to give up on everything. At the time, I thought it was just a rough patch, something that would pass. But instead, it grew stronger. The constant feeling of being drained began to take over my days, and with it came apathy. Simple things like studying, hanging out with friends, or even getting out of bed in the morning started to feel like mountains I couldn't climb anymore. One event that deeply marked me was when I decided to cancel my own graduation party. It was supposed to be a moment of celebration, something I had worked so hard for, but I couldn't find the energy to celebrate. What could I possibly say to my friends and family? I chose to shut myself in my room, sinking into an emptiness that no one seemed to understand. The friendships that had once been strong started to slowly fade away, and that hurt more than I was willing to admit. I didn't know it back then, but these were the first signs of the depression that would come to dominate my life in the years that followed. The anxiety about the future, the fear of failure, and the constant feeling of not being good enough followed me like shadows wherever I went. But instead of reaching out for help, I did what so many do. I hid it all. My smile became a well-crafted mask, and no one around me could see the real pain I was battling. Gradually, I started to feel like I was losing control of myself. The things that used to bring me joy, like my work, friends, and hobbies, completely lost their spark. It was as if a thick fog had settled over my mind, distancing me from everything and everyone. I woke up every morning with an overwhelming sense of emptiness, and what once were simple tasks, like getting out of bed or taking a shower, now felt like impossible missions. The feeling of futility became my constant companion. Everything I did seemed pointless. Work, which I used to approach with dedication and even a bit of pleasure, began to feel overwhelming. I started making mistakes with simple tasks, missing deadlines, and constantly feeling like I was falling behind. Every email I received made my heart race, as if it were an accusation that I was failing at everything. There came a point when I spent hours reorganizing my schedule, as if an obsession with control could somehow ease the anxiety that consumed me. At home, my self-care began to deteriorate in alarming ways. Sometimes I'd go days without showering or eating a proper meal. Insomnia became a constant in my nights. I'd lie awake for hours, replaying catastrophic thoughts about the future. I imagined myself failing, disappointing my family, sinking deeper by the day. This left me exhausted, and each morning, waking up became harder and harder. My relationships with my family began to fall apart. My mom, always so attentive, was the first to notice something was wrong. At first, she thought I was just stressed from work and would ask, "Are you okay, Mike? You seem tired." I'd respond with a simple, "I'm just a bit worn out, Mom." But inside, I knew it was much more than that. My friends, who used to be a source of joy, began to drift away. I didn't have the energy to go out anymore, and after canceling so many plans, they eventually stopped inviting me. One day, my best friend Daniel sent me a text. "You've disappeared, man. Everything okay?" I wanted to respond, wanted to explain what was happening, but the fear of seeming weak held me back. I just left the message unanswered. At work, my colleagues started noticing my withdrawal. I used to join the conversations at lunch, crack jokes, and was seen as someone cheerful. Now, I ate alone, avoiding any interaction. My boss, after noticing my drop in performance, began questioning me more often. The pressure increased, and it only fueled my anxiety further. As the months passed, isolation took over my life. The feeling that no one understood what I was going through made me believe it was better this way, that I should handle everything on my own. But with each passing day, I sank deeper. It was like being in a bottomless pit, and no one around me seemed to notice how loudly I was screaming inside. The most intense crises started hitting me unexpectedly, catching me off guard, even though I had become used to the constant weight of depression. Some days were worse than others, but there were moments when I simply couldn't get out of bed. The feeling of being trapped inside my own body was suffocating. My limbs felt heavy, like they were made of lead, and I couldn't even summon the energy to open my eyes. On the worst days, getting up to drink a glass of water felt impossible. The despair was crushing. In those moments, one question echoed in my mind. Why keep trying if nothing ever gets better? There was no hope, just the certainty that nothing would change. Dark thoughts began to creep in. The world around me kept moving, while I was paralyzed, consumed by a void that no one seemed to see. I remember one particular day when I had an important project due at work. I was already weeks behind, trying to find the strength to finish, but that day, everything fell apart. I sat at my desk, staring at a blank screen, unable to move a muscle. The deadline came and went, and I knew the client was unhappy. The shame gnawed at me, and the fear of being reprimanded only made the anxiety worse. My coworkers talked about the missed deadline, and it led me into one of the worst breakdowns I've ever had. I spent the next 3 days locked in my room, ignoring calls and messages, completely incapable of facing the situation. These episodes also brought on self-destructive thoughts. There were moments when I found myself wondering if the people around me wouldn't be better off without me. I felt like a burden to my family, a failure at work, and a friend no one wanted to be around anymore. With each crisis, these thoughts intensified, creating a destructive cycle I couldn't break free from. Social isolation hit its peak as well. I was invited to my best friend Daniel's birthday party, but when I reached the door, I was overwhelmed by a sudden wave of panic. It felt like I couldn't breathe, and the thought of going inside and interacting with people froze me in place. I stood there for minutes trying to catch my breath, but the more I thought about it, the more anxious I became. I decided to leave without even going in. Later, Daniel called, worried, asking why I hadn't shown up. I lied, saying I wasn't feeling well. But in reality, it was the fear of facing the world that consumed me. In the first few months, I didn't know how to deal with these crises. The only thing that seemed possible was trying to escape them. I began avoiding any kind of interaction, burying myself in distractions like social media and binge-watching shows. looking for ways to numb my mind. But all it did was pull me further away from what really mattered, driving me into even deeper isolation. At times, I turned to self-destructive habits, like sleeping all day to avoid facing my thoughts or overeating in an attempt to fill the emptiness I felt. But nothing seemed to work. Every attempt to escape only deepened the guilt I felt for not being able to pull myself out of it. I was lost, and at that moment, I couldn't see any way out. There came a point when everything became unsustainable. I was more absent from work, missing deadlines, neglecting even the most basic responsibilities, and, most painfully, distancing myself from the people who truly mattered. During one of my most intense crises, I realized I couldn't go on like this any longer. I spent days locked in my room, ignoring every attempt from friends and family to reach out. The weight of living like that, isolated, drowning in darkness, started to suffocate me. One night, during one of my worst episodes, I lay there staring at the ceiling, my thoughts spinning uncontrollably, and I asked myself, is there a way out of this? The thought of disappearing started creeping into my mind with a terrifying intensity. It was the first time those thoughts had hit me with such force. That's when something inside me screamed for help. I knew I needed it, or everything would fall apart. But admitting that wasn't easy. I grew up believing that emotional struggles were something you handled on your own, with sheer willpower. Seeking help felt like admitting weakness, and for a long time, I resisted the idea of talking about what was happening. I didn't want my parents or friends to see me as broken, someone who couldn't handle life. Plus, the fear of stigma was very real. I worried that people would judge me or look at me differently if they knew I was fighting depression. When I finally decided to see a doctor, the emotional barriers didn't just disappear. I was referred to a therapist, and while I knew I needed help, I struggled to open up during the sessions. In the first few appointments, I felt uncomfortable and hesitant to really talk about what was going through my mind. Therapy seemed, at first, like this distant thing, like I was waiting for some magical cure that wasn't coming. The resistance to medication was another hurdle. When the doctor suggested antidepressants, I was filled with doubts. Does this mean there's something wrong with me? Will I have to rely on meds for the rest of my life? The idea of taking medication felt like a confirmation that I was in an irreversible situation. For the first few days, I couldn't bring myself to start the treatment, afraid of the side effects and what it might mean for my identity. I wanted to believe I could get out of this on my own, but deep down, I knew I had to try. My mom's support was crucial during this time. She stood by me, even though she didn't fully understand what I was going through. It was during a conversation with her that I finally broke down. For the first time, I talked about the weight of depression, the constant exhaustion, and the despair that was consuming me. To my surprise, she opened up about her own battles with anxiety, something I had never known before. It brought us closer in a way I never imagined. She encouraged me to stick with the treatment and keep going to therapy, reminding me that seeking help wasn't a sign of weakness, but of strength. Over time, I took the first steps toward caring for my mental health. Therapy, which at first felt strange, started to make sense. Little by little, I became more comfortable sharing my thoughts and emotions. Talking about my fears and anxieties with my therapist brought a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. She helped me understand that depression wasn't a sign that I was weak, but a condition that could be treated, and that I wasn't alone in this. Accepting medication was also an important step. Despite my initial fears, I began to notice small improvements in my energy and mood, which gave me the motivation to keep going. Though the progress was slow, I started to see that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Along with therapy and medication, some friends began to reach out again. Ben, a childhood friend, was one of those people. He had also gone through a tough time, and when he heard about my situation, he shared his own experiences. Talking to him made me feel less isolated, and knowing that he had come out on the other side gave me hope. These first steps, though hesitant and full of doubts, marked the beginning of my recovery. I started to realize that seeking help wasn't a sign of defeat, but an act of strength. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a way back for me. Over time, I began to realize that the road to recovery would be built on small steps, not some miraculous cure. The first thing I learned was the importance of creating simple routines. Depression had thrown my life into chaos, and I felt like I was losing control of everything. My therapist suggested I start with small goals, like getting out of bed at the same time each day and going for a 10-minute walk. At first, it felt like an insignificant task, but it gave me a sense of accomplishment, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Another tool that helped me was keeping a journal. At first, the idea of writing down my feelings seemed unnecessary, but as I started putting my thoughts on paper, I realized how much it cleared my mind. I wrote about the hard days, but also about the small wins, and seeing my progress, no matter how small, gave me a glimmer of hope. Therapy also played a huge role in this process, helping me see depression as something I could manage, not something that defined who I was. One of the most memorable moments during this phase happened on one of my rare walks outside. I was walking through the park, and out of nowhere, felt a gentle breeze on my face and heard the birds chirping. It was something so simple, but in that moment, I realized that there was still beauty in the world, even amidst all the darkness. That brief moment of relief showed me that while depression was part of my life, it didn't have to be everything I experienced. There were still moments of light, however fleeting. Therapy was crucial during this stage of my recovery. My therapist helped me develop ways to cope with my negative thoughts, especially the practice of reframing how I viewed challenges. Instead of seeing every bad day as a failure, I started to understand them as part of the process. This shifted how I looked at depression. I had always believed I needed to get over the illness once and for all. Now I saw that improvement would happen gradually and that every small victory mattered. It was also around this time that I decided to join a support group. At first, I was completely resistant. I didn't like the idea of sharing my experiences with strangers. However, when I walked into the room for the first time, I was surprised by how welcoming the atmosphere was. For the first time, I felt understood. Hearing other people's stories, who were facing similar struggles, made me realize I wasn't alone, and that talking about my feelings didn't make me weak. In fact, it gave me strength. In the group, there was no judgment, only empathy. Slowly, I began to open up, and over time, sharing experiences became a vital part of my healing process. Rediscovering my hobbies was another key part of my recovery. For years, I had abandoned photography, a passion I'd had since I was a teenager. Depression had stolen my desire to capture the world around me. But, encouraged by my therapist and the support group, I picked up my camera again. At first, it was just a way to distract myself, but I soon realized photography was a form of expression for me. Each picture I took was a way to externalize my feelings, to reconnect with the world. Photography helped me see beauty in small things again, like a beam of sunlight or the texture of a leaf, something I had completely forgotten. The support of friends and family became more important than I had imagined. Slowly, I began to trust the people around me again. My mom had always been there for me, but now I could talk to her about my ups and downs. My friend Ben, who had also gone through a tough time, became someone I could confide in without fear of judgment. Knowing I had a support system gave me a sense of security, something depression had taken away from me. These tools, therapy, routine, hobbies, and emotional support, became essential for me to start rebuilding my life. Depression was still there, but now I had ways to cope with it. I learned that the path to recovery isn't a straight line, but a process full of ups and downs. And above all, I discovered that there's strength in continuing, even on the days when it feels impossible. One of the most significant moments of overcoming happened on a day that seemed like any other. I had been struggling for weeks, with dark thoughts creeping back in, and the temptation to lock myself away in my room was strong. But something inside me told me to try again. So, that morning, I gathered all the courage I had and decided to do something simple: leave the house. It was a small victory, but for me, it felt like climbing a mountain. I put on a jacket and walked to the neighborhood cafe. As I walked, my heart raced. I thought about turning back more than once, but I kept going. When I arrived, just being around other people, feeling like I was part of the world again, was a relief. I ordered a coffee, sat at a table by the window, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt present. It wasn't a huge accomplishment to anyone else, but for me, sitting there, watching people pass by and sipping that coffee, was a massive victory. I wasn't just getting through the day. I was starting to live again, even if just for a few minutes. That was when I realized that, even in the midst of my struggles, there was progress. I started to notice that small actions, like leaving the house or taking a picture, had a deep impact on my recovery. Before, I used to think progress would come in big leaps, but now I understood that every step, no matter how small, mattered. Walking back home after that coffee, with the sense that I could actually do these little things, was a shift in perspective. Experiences like this made me rethink what overcoming really means. I used to believe that I would only beat depression when I was completely free of it. Now I realize that overcoming depression isn't about erasing it entirely. It's about finding ways to live with it day by day. Each simple gesture, like going out for coffee, replying to a friend's message, or even just getting out of bed on a tough day, was, for me, an act of resistance. It was a way to show that I was still fighting, and that was a victory. Another important moment was when I started taking photos again. I was walking through the park and brought my camera with me. I didn't have high expectations, but when I saw a simple scene of a child playing with their dog, I felt the urge to capture that moment. I looked through the viewfinder and took the shot. When I saw the result, something shifted inside me. The photo captured a lightness and joy that I hadn't felt in a long time, but there it was, right in front of me. Returning to photography felt like rediscovering a part of myself that I had lost. Each click of the camera grounded me, connecting me to the world in a way words couldn't. These small moments, ones I would have overlooked before, now held tremendous meaning. They showed me that even when it felt like depression was winning, I was still making progress. Maybe the progress was slow and not always linear, but it was there. I began to recognize these small victories as essential steps on my journey. These moments taught me to be kinder to myself. Overcoming doesn't mean being perfect every day. It means trying, even when everything feels difficult. I learned that recovery is full of ups and downs, and that I needed to celebrate every victory, no matter how small. Finding joy again in simple things, like a cup of coffee or a photograph, reminded me that life still had so much to offer, even in the midst of my internal battles. These victories gave me the strength to keep fighting. They reminded me that no matter how hard depression tried to pull me down, I was stronger than I had realized. And above all, these small wins gave me hope. Hope that, even on the darkest days, there was still light ahead. Today, I look at my life with a much more balanced and realistic perspective. Depression is still a part of me, but I've learned that it doesn't define who I am. I understand now that there isn't a magical cure, and this will be an ongoing journey, filled with ups and downs. But I feel more prepared to face the challenges ahead. I have more tools at my disposal, and most importantly, I've learned to be gentle with myself during the tough days. In my darkest moments, it was almost impossible to imagine that I would ever feel any sense of normalcy or lightness again. Now, I can see that recovery is a journey. It's not a straight line. It's a winding road where sometimes we take a step back before moving forward again. And that's okay. I've come to accept that bad days will come, but with the strategies I've developed, I know I can handle them in healthier ways. I don't need to conquer depression every single day. I just need to do my best to keep moving forward. The small gestures that once felt insignificant, like getting out of bed or going out for coffee, have turned into significant achievements. Those moments have shown me that even when things feel impossible, I am capable of pushing through. Now, I know I can find small rays of hope, even when the sky is overcast. Photography, for example, remains a form of expression that brings me joy. I use it as a way to reconnect with the world and to find beauty in the little details. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that I don't have to face everything alone. For a long time, I carried the weight of depression as if it were solely my responsibility. But I've realized that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. I still attend therapy regularly and participate in support groups. These tools are crucial in helping me stay stable. Talking with others who are going through similar situations reminds me that I'm not alone in this battle, and that makes all the difference. Moreover, I've learned to recognize the warning signs before a crisis escalates. When I notice that I'm starting to isolate myself, or that my thoughts are growing darker, I know it's time to reach out to my support system, my therapist, my friends, or my mom. Self-awareness has become a powerful ally. I no longer let things spiral out of control before taking action. Now, I take care of myself proactively, and that has made a tremendous difference in my quality of life. My message to anyone facing depression is simple: don't give up. I know how overwhelming depression can be, how it can make you feel like there's no way out. But I'm here to tell you that even on the darkest days, there's a way to move forward. It may be a small step, a simple gesture, but it matters. The struggle isn't easy, and it may never completely disappear. But each moment of resistance is a victory. It's essential to seek help, even if it feels daunting or challenging at first. Talking about your feelings, finding a therapist, or opening up to a friend can change everything. I used to believe I had to face it all alone, but discovering that there were people willing to listen and support me was transformative. Don't be afraid to take that first step. You are not alone, and there is a path to the light, even if it sometimes feels far away. Lastly, I want to remind you that depression is not a weakness. It takes incredible strength to keep fighting, even when everything inside you screams to give up. Every small progress, every day you choose to try again, is a testament to your courage and resilience. Believe in yourself and in those small moments of victory. They add up and can change your life. Reflecting on my journey with depression, I realize it has taught me more about myself than I could have ever imagined. In the beginning, I thought depression was a sign of weakness, something I needed to conquer alone. But over time, I came to understand that acknowledging my vulnerability was, in fact, the greatest act of courage I've ever had. Admitting that I needed help, that I wasn't okay, and that there were days when I just couldn't fight anymore, was transformative. Depression forced me to look within, to confront my weaknesses and limitations, but it also revealed an inner strength I didn't know I had. Surviving each tough day, finding the courage to keep going when everything felt like it was crumbling, showed me that I am far more resilient than I ever realized. I used to think that being strong meant never wavering, never showing signs of weakness. Now, I see that being strong is about moving forward, even when the days are dark and the road seems long. The biggest lesson I've learned is that depression doesn't define who I am. It's a part of me, yes, but it's just one part, not the whole. Accepting this has allowed me to be kinder to myself, letting go of the idea that I need to be perfect or that my recovery will be linear. I've come to understand that there's room for both good days and bad days, and it's perfectly okay not to be okay sometimes. Life is full of highs and lows, and recognizing that has brought me a peace I never imagined I could achieve. I also see the importance of continuing to seek help, even when things seem to be improving. Therapy, support groups, and the people around me are essential for maintaining balance. I no longer view depression as something that will one day completely vanish, but rather as something I can manage with the right tools and support. Another thing I've learned is to cherish the moments of joy, no matter how small. Each little victory, whether it's stepping outside, responding to a friend, or taking a photo, is a reminder that there is beauty and lightness in life, even amid struggles. Being open to those moments, however small they may seem, has made all the difference. They remind me that life can still be fulfilling, even on the tough days. For anyone facing depression, I want to leave you with one final message of encouragement. You are not alone. I know how easy it is to feel isolated, as if no one can understand what you're going through. But I'm here to tell you that the fight is worth it. Depression can be a daily battle, but every day you choose to keep going is a victory. And as dark as things may seem right now, there is hope. Believe in yourself, even when everything feels impossible. Seeking help is not a sign of failure, it's a sign of strength. Whether through therapy, support groups, or simply talking to someone you trust, don't hesitate to open up. There are people ready to listen and walk alongside you on this journey. You deserve to live a full life, filled with moments of joy and peace, even if they come in small fragments. And above all, never forget, you are stronger than you think. Every day you choose to continue is a testament to your courage. Keep fighting, keep believing in yourself, and know that life has so much more to offer. The light at the end of the tunnel may seem distant, but it's there, and you can reach it, one step at a time. With all my gratitude, Mike.
Now that we've come to the end of Lucas's inspiring story, his words remind us of the strength that can be found even in the darkest moments. The journey through depression is full of challenges, but every step toward recovery is a meaningful victory. If you have faced, or are currently facing, the darkness of depression, know that you are not alone. Every day is a battle, and each small victory deserves to be celebrated. If this story resonated with you in any way, share your own experience or leave a message in the comments. This is a safe space to exchange stories and support one another. Let's build a network of solidarity where the fight for mental health is acknowledged, and mutual support makes all the difference. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to receive more stories of strength and inspiration. Together, we can light each other's way. Never forget, asking for help is an act of courage, and every step forward is a sign of strength. We're with you on this journey.